Pros and cons of coffee and caffeine. My name is Kaylee and I'm a certified nutritionist and gut health specialist, and I love helping people to overcome their chronic gut issues at the root and really nourish their bodies with ancestral nutrition and then thrive health-wise. So let's get into it. So coffee gets a lot of opinions nowadays. Some people swear that it's the worst thing and you shouldn't drink coffee, while others tell you that it's so great for your metabolism and fat loss and it pairs excellently with keto and intermittent fasting. So it can be a little bit challenging to figure out, wait, am I supposed to drink coffee? Am I not supposed to drink coffee? How does that figure in with gut issues if you've got IBS or if you've got IBD or some other gut issue? How does coffee factor in? Is it right for you? Is it not right for you? So that's what I'm going to be covering in this video. Now, my approach is different than a lot of people. I'm not going to tell you coffee is great, and I'm not going to tell you coffee is terrible, because I genuinely do not believe either of those are objectively true. Instead, I think that there is a list of pros and a list of cons that go with coffee. And depending on you as a person and your individual symptoms and your own body and lifestyle, coffee is either going to be a good or a poor choice for you. Now, beyond that, there are tips to buy better quality coffee. There are tips to drinking coffee that will work better for you. So I will get into all of that, and I'll get into the specifics of conditions and symptoms that generally do really well or really poor with coffee. So first, let's get into these pros and cons. So, okay, coffee gives you energy. I'm calling it a pro. I have a con for that later, but I'm going to start with that as a pro. It can be really helpful to get that little burst of energy. A lot of people use it for that. And while I don't recommend using coffee for your energy, I think that you should be able to feel absolutely fine, energized without your coffee. I think that's really important. I do recognize that it can still be seen as a benefit. You know, if you were driving late and starting to get tired and you don't want to crash and you have to drive, then it's a benefit there. If you have to study and coffee is going to help you, then, I see how it can be a benefit there. It's not really much of a health benefit, but it could be a lifestyle one. So I wanted to throw that in there. Also, how this works is important because it's going to factor into a lot of the other pros and cons we talk about. So before coffee, in our brain, we have these receptors for adenosine. So adenosine is a little compound that comes around and it builds up and it binds to these receptors as we get more tired. So the more adenosine receptors that are full of adenosine, the more tired we are. Caffeine sits on those receptors, blocking adenosine from binding and making us feel tired. So it gives us a false sense of energy that we might not actually have. So that is something to keep in mind. When the caffeine wears off, all those become free and they're usually flooded with adenosine, making you really tired. Another thing to know is as we build up a tolerance to coffee, our body will actually make more adenosine receptors to try to feel those tired effects. So that is why you need more coffee for the same effects. But we'll get into that more later. So the second benefit is it can aid in fat loss, and the way that it does this is it boosts your metabolism. So that's kind of a double. If you're trying to lose weight, it can be helpful. It's not necessarily the thing I would go for fully. I would actually work on your diet and your lifestyle and other things more, but it can be one little tool you can use. And the metabolism boosting benefits are going to be kind of the bigger deal here, in my opinion. So it can help increase your metabolism. So if you've been like a chronic dieter and gotten your calorie intake really low and you're struggling to get your metabolism back up, it can be beneficial here. So then the third one is going to relate much more to gut health. So coffee is really helpful for giving you a bowel movement. There have been different studies, and one of them showed that about 1/3 of people will feel an increase in contractions in their colon after drinking coffee, which will aid in having an urge to go to the bathroom and will also aid in having a bowel movement. Now, if you are totally dependent on your coffee to have a bowel movement, that is not a good thing. But in my experience, I've found that coffee is not dependence forming like other laxatives. This is just my experience. I can have a bowel movement no problem without coffee. If I do have coffee, it certainly brings on that urge to go, but there are many mornings that I go far before I ever have coffee. So I have found it not to be a very dependence forming thing, but it's really helpful if you're currently constipated and you're in that path of getting out of constipation. It can just help your body get more regularly, especially if you drink it at the same time every morning. It gets your body in that rhythm of, okay, now's the urge, now's the time to go. So I do think it can be really beneficial for constipation. Not for diarrhea though. If you've got diarrhea and coffee makes it worse, then that's something you're going to want to avoid until you've balanced out your bowel movements and they are a healthy consistency. If you have any gut reactions increase because of coffee or caffeine intake, I would just cut it out for the time being. Everyone's going to be so different. I have some clients that drink coffee no problem and they love it and it doesn't affect their gut issues or it helps them. And I have some clients that are like, I can't even touch black tea. Like that does not work for me, let alone coffee. So really listen to your body here. So fourth, it can reduce pain and headaches. So coffee is a vasodilator. So that means that it dilates, so it opens kind of your veins in your brain or your head. So by doing this, your blood flows better, quicker essentially. And that can relieve pressure, so it can relieve headaches. This is a short-term fix. I'll get into it later, but if you have chronic headaches, it could be caused by caffeine. So this is not like a coffee is the fix for headaches by any means, but if you're feeling really crappy and you have a bad headache, a little bit of caffeine can actually help. Let's see. So then when you feel bad, coffee can make you feel better. If you feel sick, if you're all congested, if you just feel crappy from a cold, a little coffee can, make you a little less congested. It can make you a little happier and it can give you a tiny bit of energy so you just feel a little less blah. So I'm not saying coffee is like an amazing tool for when you're sick, but it can aid in making you feel a little bit better. So then my last pro is that it's beneficial for liver detox. So if you've heard of coffee enemas before, where you put coffee in your colon and it gets absorbed by your liver and helps dump bile out, drinking coffee will help you do not the same thing, but a very similar thing. It will promote a bile release. So that's when your gallbladder releases bile into your digestive system. It's really important to keep this bile moving, which I've talked about in a lot of other videos. So it does have liver detox benefits. So if you're drinking coffee and that's helping to stimulate bile flow and a bile release, and then you're also getting that nice urge to go to the bathroom, it is helping your colon detox too. So this isn't something that you should rely on. It can be a tool temporarily, and you can still continue to drink it if it works for you, but realize that that's a benefit, but not to rely too strongly on. Okay, let's get into the cons. So it can cause a massive energy crash. So this is the flip side to the brief pro of giving you some energy. When that caffeine wears off, especially if you're like a chronic coffee drinker, or maybe not chronic, but like if you drink a lot of coffee and your body's built up a ton of adenosine receptors, then when all of that caffeine leaves, you're gonna get a really big crash because all the adenosine that was sitting around is gonna go fill all those receptors. So you're gonna get a massive energy crash, and that's really not ideal. And it's not really good to get in the habit of drinking more and more to offset those energy crashes. I will get into better healthy habits if you do choose to drink coffee later in the video. So another con is it can inhibit nutrient absorption, especially calcium and iron. So if you are prone to iron and calcium deficiency, coffee is not going to be for you. The third one is it can increase anxiety and like shakiness. So again, if you're prone to those, coffee can make it worse. One thing I will say is I used to get crazy energized when I'd have coffee because it just wasn't regular for me, and I would get super shaky and I did not like the feeling. Now that I drink 1 or 2 cups in the morning and that's a regular thing for me, and I follow a few other tips that I will give you at the end, I don't get that anymore. So this is something that can be overcome, but yeah, it's also something if you're very anxious and you notice coffee makes you anxious and shaky and more stressed, like it's probably not the best thing for you. So then, let's see. Oh, it can increase cortisol too. So that's partly why it does that. So my fourth con is it is addictive, physically and mentally. So caffeine is a drug, so we might not act like it, but it is a drug, so it's important to realize that. Now, it's obviously not as bad of a drug as a lot of other ones out there. It's probably the most mild drug that I know of, at least. But it still is, and it still acts kind of similar in our body. We still get a high via dopamine, so getting more dopamine from coffee. And it is still addictive. It is addictive habitually, but it also is addictive physically. And you do get withdrawals when you stop it abruptly. So that brings me to my fifth con, and that is it does cause withdrawals, especially withdrawal headaches. So if you drink coffee a lot and then you go, like say you drink it every day and then you go a day without having it, you can get a really gnarly headache. I have made this mistake before and it really sucks. It's a really bad headache. And part of the reason for this is caffeine is a vasodilator. So you're going to have vasoconstriction instead, and you're not going to have that normal dilation that you're used to. So when your veins are constricted, it's going to slow down blood flow. There's going to be a little bit more pressure. So this is definitely something that you can get back to being used to how you are non-caffeine or non-caffeinated. But when there's a abrupt change and suddenly you are not having caffeine when you were used to it, you will often get really bad withdrawal headaches. And you can avoid these by tapering off. So essentially, if you drink 2 cups of coffee a day right now and you want to quit coffee, I would not personally recommend quitting cold turkey because of the really, really uncomfortable headaches that I've gotten. Everyone's different. Some people don't get them. If you know you don't get them, go for it. But instead, you want to taper off. So instead of 2 cups, start having 1 cup a day, or start having 1.5 cups a day. After a few days, work down to 1. After a few more days or a week, work down to half a cup, and then none. And then another thing I've noticed is if I've accidentally weaned off too quickly, having a little coffee is a good thing. So if you're weaning and you're like, oh dang, here comes the headache, you can just make a tiny bit of coffee and have a little bit, and that should be good. And then you can stop usually after that just fine. You can also switch to something like black tea or chai that is less caffeinated, or green tea. That's another method of tapering off. So this is going to be number 6, is the biggest con in my opinion. Personally, I think this is where most of the negative health things from coffee come from. And that is going to be, it can contain chemicals, pesticides, and mycotoxins. Now, the good thing about this is the biggest con is also one that you can completely fix. So there is an upside there. Now, let's start with pesticides. Coffee is the most commonly sprayed crop with pesticides. So there you go. If you're not buying organic coffee, it's most likely going to be sprayed with pesticides. I'm not going to go into all the negatives of pesticides here, but they're not going to be a good thing to be consuming or brewing into a drink that you're consuming. So that's a huge thing. Chemicals. When you are making your coffee, the materials you use are really important. If you're using plastic, bleached filters, if you're using one of those machines you put the little cuppy plastic things into, anything like that, that is leaching plastic, endocrine disruptors, and toxins into your coffee. Not a good idea. So there's another element. Now, the mycotoxins. Now, mycotoxins are a byproduct of mold. So a lot of coffee, because it's a plantation, I'm not sure, a lot of coffee farms, what they do is when the coffee's kind of sitting around, it can be prone to a lot of mold. Now, the mold will get roasted out of the beans, but the mold makes these mycotoxins, like this one, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's like ochratoxin A. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Anyways, so mycotoxins like this have various health risks. I wrote a few of them down here. So they can increase, or they may, this is based on some studies, so it's not 100% certain, but they may increase the risk of cancer, decrease immunity, cause kidney damage, inhibit protein synthesis, inhibit ATP formation, and increase free radicals. So that is not good. Anyway, you can always look more into mycotoxins if you want, but I just wanted to let you know they are very common and prominent in coffee. There are 2 studies that I looked at. One had 51 different coffee samples from France and Germany and Guatemala, and that one found 96% of them contained the oxycrytoxin A, and a study of 128 samples found 56%. So they're kind of small studies, so it's not perfect, but just to give you that idea that there is a lot of coffees that contain this. So what do you do to avoid these negatives of coffee? So you can buy organic, it's not going to have pesticides in it. And then you can use good materials to make your coffee. So stainless steel French press, a glass French press, a ceramic pour over, a glass pour over, a stainless steel pour over using non-bleached filters. Those are all going to be great options for making your coffee. Get good brands. I avoid blends just because if it's a blend, you have to make sure like all the different sources of coffee didn't have mycotoxins in them. So I prefer to not buy blends. I buy dark roast because the longer roasting does roast out more of those mycotoxins, so you're less likely to have as many of them. And I usually just read something on the label trying to find out if it's like a smaller farm, a more conscious one. You can buy ones that are specifically like lab tested for no mycotoxins and molds. So you can look into those. They are excellent. They're just a bit more expensive, like 2 or 5 times more expensive than just a good organic one at the store. So I don't go that extra mile on it, but those are some of the things you can look for. I've heard good things about the brand Purity Coffee. I've tried them before. I thought it was really good. I don't know all the ins and outs of their company and how they work, but I believe they are lower in mycotoxins if you want to look at one. So then my 7th con is going to be it can interfere with sleep. Now this can be kind of an easy fix if you just have your caffeine in the morning. It's unlikely going to interfere with your sleep, but if you're having it later in the day, it can definitely mess with your sleep. The 8th is going to be very specific to pregnancy, but when you are pregnant, caffeine and coffee, so caffeinated coffee, but caffeine primarily, can be really, really harmful to your baby. And when you're breastfeeding, coffee and caffeine can still be harmful to your baby. So there's a lot of mixed studies and reviews on this. Essentially, anything above 200 milligrams a day of caffeine is seen as like a big no for women that are pregnant or breastfeeding. It looks to me like it's definitely ideal to have none. Some foods like chocolate have caffeine in them already, or to at least keep it very, very minimal. A lot of studies suggested that greater caffeine consumption increased the risk of miscarriage, of stillbirths, and of a lower birth weight, and a lower birth weight can be linked to other complications as well. So it's up to you to decide what's best for you, but I just wanted to mention that it is not great for pregnant women. It does cross the placenta. Your baby will be in contact with the caffeine, and they cannot metabolize it the same way that we do. It's not great for children either. So, of course, that only applies to some people, but that is a big thing to keep in mind when we're talking about pros and cons of caffeine. My last con is it makes you pee a lot, and it's just kind of annoying. So it's a diuretic, so it does make you pee a lot. So in my mind, that's another con. So that is all my pros and cons of coffee. So now you're probably thinking, or you probably were throughout the whole video, should you or should you not consume caffeine? Well, I have some lists right here of people that generally, or characteristics people can have that would be great for caffeine and not great for caffeine. And then I'll talk a little bit more about if you are going to consume coffee and caffeine, how to do it better. So you're probably, I don't know, most people are probably going to fall into some of the yes, some of the no. So it's up to you to decide what works best for you. So first of all, people or things that you could have that would do well with caffeine. If you are prone to constipation, if you feel good when consuming it, if you want to boost your metabolism, if you want help with your liver detox and bile flow, if you get a headache, it's good for immediate relief. This is not good for chronic headaches though. If you are sick, it can be nice. And if you just really, really enjoy your coffee and you still feel fine, then, you can go for it. It's okay. I will talk about some things I suggest with it, but still, that is in that category. So these are going to be things that I would say are signs you probably shouldn't be having coffee or should take an extra precaution. Or do something else. So if you have calcium or iron deficiencies, that can be one. Now, note on iron deficiency, typically it's actually going to be a vitamin A or copper deficiency that's leading to the iron deficiency. So if you're having some liver at another time when you're not drinking your coffee, that would most likely fix that. But yeah, you just don't really want to be having your main sources of iron. So with the iron would be any vitamin C, vitamin A, and copper that help you absorb iron. You don't want your main source of that with your coffee, or really, I believe it's within around 3 hours of that. And then same with calcium. You don't want your main source of calcium to be right with your coffee because you're not going to absorb as much. So then people with osteoporosis, probably better to avoid coffee because it's going to inhibit your calcium absorption. Also, pregnant or nursing women, I already went in depth on that. Children, people with insomnia, people who feel bad when they consume coffee, people with chronic headaches, because that can be a cause, like I talked about how you have the vasodilation and then it constricts later in the day. That can cause headaches. So if you do, definitely don't cold turkey or you're going to get a horrible headache. If you're prone to really bad headaches and you want to quit coffee, wean off like I talked about earlier. People with anxiety, and then people with really loose stools or diarrhea who find that's worse with coffee or brought on by coffee. So that's going to give you kind of an idea of how you put all these pros and cons into practice to decide if it works well for you or not. Now, I am in the group where I really enjoy the taste and I like a little bit as long as it's not making me feel bad. And it doesn't make me feel bad as long as I do a few things. So I'm going to talk about what those are. 1, buy a good quality coffee and make it good. So like I talked about, get organic coffee, use stainless steel, ceramic, or glass, or some material like that. If you're using filters, make sure they're unbleached. I use a stainless steel French press, and that's what I love. I use filtered water, organic coffee, and yeah, that's where I am there. So that's really important. You don't really want coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. That's going to make you more jittery. It's going to have a stronger effect. If you consume your coffee with a balanced meal with or right after, that will be so much better. So I don't have coffee till I've been up for like 3 or 4 hours because I like to get up, do my workout, and then I make breakfast and I start eating, and then I don't start having coffee till partway through breakfast and I finish it after. So you definitely want a balanced macro meal. The carbs are really important for balancing the caffeine. Protein is really important for balancing the carbs. So you really want everything there. And of course you want some good fats in there too. I drink it earlier in the day. I don't drink it later in the day. You don't really want to be drinking it later in the day, especially if you have sleep issues. Everybody metabolizes caffeine at a different speed. So, you can mess around with this and find your own wiggle room. I just don't like to push it, so I don't want to have it late in the day. And if you are gonna go for a decaf coffee, note that there can be some chemicals from the decaffeination process. So a water processed decaf is going to be a better option toxin wise. So that's something to keep in mind. And then another thing to think about is chai is another good alternative. Black tea has, I want to say it's about half the amount of caffeine. I don't remember off the top of my head though, that coffee does. And then the other spices in chai, cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, those all help to balance the effects of the caffeine as well. So that's going to be really good. And then incorporating, like having some milk or some butter, you can even put a tiny bit of honey or something like that if you want in your coffee, is also going to help balance it so you don't feel so anxious and jittery and energy crazed from it. I honestly have my coffee when I naturally have tons of energy before I've even drinking it, so I don't really notice a difference anymore. I do notice I feel better with 1 instead of 2 cups, but sometimes I just really like the taste of the second one. So that's kind of how I've used this for myself. So if you are interested in getting more help with your health and you like this approach to really digging down into each individual person and their circumstances to figure out what works best for them, I do that same thing with my clients when I'm working with them to help them to heal their gut issues. So if you're looking for help with healing your chronic gut issues through diet and holistic practices and you want that guidance through that, then my program Ancestral Gut Healing would probably be a great fit for you. I give my clients a roadmap to heal their guts. This has helped tons of my clients to heal in as little as 3 months and be totally symptom free in 3 months. That's not everyone, but that is a lot of people. And then I also give you a more personalized strategy and roadmap for you to achieve your health goals and overcome your specific gut issues. And I give you guidance throughout the whole process. So you have lots of resources, you have group calls, you can message me, we have one-on-one calls. So you get a lot of support in overcoming your gut issues. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, I will leave 2 links down below. One just talks a little bit more about my program, my clients' experiences, and stuff like that to answer your basic questions. And then if you want to talk to me and actually really learn more about it, you're really interested, and you just want to see if this is a good fit for you specifically, get all your questions answered, I'll leave a link where you can book a call with me down below, and I would be happy to answer all your questions and help you to determine if this would be a good fit for you on your journey. So yeah, I would love to talk to you if you are interested in that. And then if you want to know more about just a gut healing diet in general, kind of what things to eat. I talked about coffee in this video. It was very specific on coffee. If you want to zoom out and kind of understand how to eat to heal your gut, what kind of foods to eat, what kind of foods to avoid, and you want to see how this is in practice, I have a whole video that is a grocery haul of mine. So it's the groceries I bought for 1 week of eating for my boyfriend and I, what we eat in a week. And this is very gut friendly. There are a few things I mentioned in the video I eat now because I've healed my gut that I would not have eaten in the past while I was healing, but I think it's like 3 things max. It's very small. So this is exactly the kind of diet that I recommend to my clients. Everyone eats a little different, but if you want to see what I eat in a week and what I really recommend for eating in a week to heal your gut, I'll link that video right there so you can check it out. Thank you for watching.